I've got the mounts tacked in place now because I felt I couldn't realistically make any more adjustments to the angle of the nose of the diff. But I thought now we might have a look at some of the new, well, all of the new parts that I've purchased for the axle and the brakes on the axle. Just go through those so that you can see what I had to buy. Well, actually, to be honest, I didn't have to buy all of these parts, but a lot of the smaller parts are so cheap that it would have been a false economy not to change them now. So the biggest item you can see pretty clearly is the rear diff pan and the gaskets. They're only available in packs of 5. That's the smallest amount because they're so cheap. So loads of gaskets. This I will be painting white before it goes on because the Lightweight obviously is a military vehicle, and they all had the diff, the rear of the diffs painted white, so I might as well do that while this is off. I got a couple of new hubcaps. Again, the old ones weren't in bad condition frankly, but they're very cheap. If they were more expensive I wouldn't have bothered. Brake shoes, which as I mentioned earlier I'm changing, not because the old ones were running short on material, they're certainly not, but because on one side there was some oil contamination from a leaking hub seal, so I had to buy a new set. I also bought a couple of new cylinders because I wasn't entirely confident in the provenance of the ones that were on there, and it looked to me certainly as if the seals had been damaged on the original ones in the process of getting new shoes on and off in the past, which to be fair is very easily done. These are just some small rubber units, the small rubber grommets which are used to hold the brake pipes in place as they move out towards the hubs. A new hydraulic hose for the brakes. This is a longer version than the standard short wheelbase item. It's a good idea to change the hoses when you can anyway, obviously. I bought some new brake drum retaining screws because not all of the original ones were present, and the ones that are there aren't in very good condition. O-rings only available in multiple packs. I actually only need 2. These are the O-rings that go on the end of the hubs, and these seal over them just to provide the final seal against oil leakage. I got some new valves for the brake system. I needed some anyway. The cylinders come with, but I wanted to have some in stock anyway, so probably I won't need to open that pack. In fact, these are you need 12 of these. These are the bolts that hold the drive flange onto the hub. Moving up here, we've got the new retaining nuts. I need 4 of those. I got a couple of new sump plugs, inner and outer wheel bearings for one side of the axle. I'm going to go into more detail with this when I actually show these being fitted into the hub, but when I took the 2 hubs off the axle I found that on one of them the bearings hadn't been actually fitted correctly. The bearing cup on the innermost bearing had not been driven fully into the casting, and as you can imagine this caused potential for the bearing not to be running true, and also it meant that the bearing was constantly rubbing against the oil seal. And sure enough, of course, this was the side that had the oil leak that meant that I needed the new shoes. So I thought, well, there's no point messing around. I will just knock out both the bearings and fit new. These are the output drive gaskets, which, in view of the amount of vibration and accelerative and decelerative loads that go through the output flange, having paper gaskets like this is a pretty disastrous idea, but it's what Land Rover have used for years, and it's one of the good old reasons that these flanges come loose and throw oil all over the back half of your Land Rover. Rear axle pinion gaskets. You only need 1. Again, I've had to order 5, but these are basically just paper gaskets. Well, slightly thicker than just paper, but you know what I mean. And I really have no idea what they're for. They're indicated in the parts catalogue pretty clearly. Well, one of them is. But I'll have to wait and see until I take the oil seal out and have a look what's going on in there to see if I can figure out what those are for. Might end up not using them. Moving on, we've got new pinion oil seals for the Salisbury Diff. These, although these have the same part number, AEU 2515, one is the leather version and one is the newer rubber version. They're very inexpensive, so I bought both, and I thought, well, when I come to do it, I'll just see which one I think looks better to use. I'll probably use the rubber one. That's what I'm used to, and I imagine the rubber ones last longer. Oil thrower 607182. They're indicated on the parts diagram for the area around the pinion nut, but I genuinely don't know what they do. Well, I assume they throw oil, but in reality, I haven't got much of a clue. I'll see when I take it all apart. I might not need them. This is the differential input drive flange. I bought a new one because I didn't have a massive amount of confidence in the condition of the old one, but I was anticipating not necessarily needing to use it. But in fact, it turns out that the old flange, while I've been doing the operating angle measurements, I've discovered that the flange that's on the Salisbury Diff now actually has a significant bend in it. Fortunately, the bend is towards the back of the vehicle, and it's in between two of the prop shaft mounting holes. So in theory, if I have to, I can use the old one with or without attempting to straighten it, but I'd rather not. Only potential snag there is that with these Salisburys of this type, they use a collapsible spacer in the pinion bearings, and that is supposed to be pre-torqued to a certain amount during manufacture. Once you've got that set, you're not supposed to fiddle with it. And so when you change the pinion oil seal, what you're supposed to do, the only available option realistically, is to mark the position of the pinion nut and then undo, and then when you've finished, do back up again to exactly the same position. Idea, of course, being that you're applying the same amount of torque as was previously being applied. Now, if you change the output flange, if the flange is even a minutely different dimension, different length, then you're going to lose the accuracy of putting the nut back where it started. So I'm going to have to take some measurements from the old and the new before I decide what I'm going to do. I would like to think this will have been machined accurately and I can use it, but no guarantee. These are the locking tabs that go in between the retaining nuts. So once you've got the right preload on the hub bearings, these are the things you use to hold the retaining nuts in place. And these are the thrust washers that go at the back of the sequence of these nuts. Slightly different design. Obviously they're designed as thrust washers, not as lock washers. Okay, so that's a run through of all the parts that I'm going to be fitting. Oh, hold on a moment, I realise I didn't mention these items. These are the oil seals for the rear of the hub. There's a Britpart one and a Cortico one, because I had the Cortico one in stock already, so that's why they're different. This is the RTC 3510 oil seal, which is correctly applicable to this Salisbury axle. This was the one fitted up until October 1980. After October 1980, these oil seals were changed to the RTC 3511 size, and the wheel bearings changed shape as well. The hub changed shape, various changes made. So now I'm going to carry on and remove the Salisbury from the chassis and complete the welding of the spring saddles and a repaint as well, rebuild of the hubs, putting the brakes back together, putting new brake pipes on. So that's all to come.